work the other day, and I picked up a new story from the backlog, and it said something like, my thing doesn't work, it said something like, as a business, I want A/B testing on the homepage, because business. Now, this is clearly very important, right, because business. So I need to do a good job here. So A/B testing on the homepage. Well, actually, that's great, because there's a gem for that. So I open up a gem file, I add the new gem in there, and then I just run bundle install, and it goes and fetches the gem for me and installs everything. The only thing left to do is run a quick script to initialize everything, check it works, then push it to production. And then we're done here. And everybody is happy. I mean, business is happy, they get their A/B testing, and I'm happy because I'm getting things done and everything is easy. But no time to stop and celebrate. I'm straight on to the next task. So it says, as a user, this is great, we should always be thinking about the user. So as a user, I want some copy changed, because reasons, I don't know. Can't argue the reasons, can we? I mean, not since Enlightenment, anyway. So, copy change, well, that's great. There's a gem for that. So, I open the gem file and add a new line in there, and then I just run bundle install, and it goes and fetches the gem for me and installs it alongside all my other very important gems. This time, I need to write some kind of config file for it, but I check it works, and then we push it to production, and we're done here. And everybody is happy. The customer is ecstatic with the copy change, and I'm happy because I'm getting things done and everything is easy. This is pretty much what it's like to be a Rails developer today. In fact, I read some research recently which suggests that Rails developers spend about half of their time just adding gems to the project. So I thought, well, what's this like in practice? I took a project. This is a real project I'm working on right now. And the first thing I thought was, well, how many gems have we got? We can just look in the gem file and count them up. And it turns out we've got 40 gems in there. But that's not everything, because these gems depend on other gems. So I thought, well, what are all the gems I need for my project? Well, we can ask Bundler this question and count them up, and it turns out there are 120 gems. Now, this project is only about 6 weeks old, so that's like 20 gems a week, 4 gems a day on average. It sounds excessive. So I thought, well, I wonder what's going on here. So I can ask Bundler to unpack all the gems in the local directory for me so I can poke around. Then I thought, well, let's find all the Ruby files in there, and we'll exclude the test ones and then just count the number of files. It turns out there's 4,000 files in there. This is a lot of files. That's way more than I can go and look at. So the next thing I thought was, well, we can take those files, right, and we can just stream them out, and we can look for, like, method declarations inside there and count those up. Now, it turns out there are 35,000 method declarations in there. It's actually a bit worse than that, because 90 or so of those are method missing. They respond to any message. And there are about 200 places that call define method and add new methods at runtime. 35,000 methods. I mean, what does this all do? What does my project actually do? I have no idea what's going on here. And to give you some kind of sense of perspective here, I thought, well, I'm going to count up all the lines of code we actually wrote in the project. This is code written by us as developers, and there's about 1,000 lines of code in here. I thought, OK, I'll do the same thing and count up the lines of code that are in all the gems. It turns out to be 370,000 lines. OK, so here's our code compared to the other people's code. Or maybe look at it another way. I mean, here's all the code that's been through our rigorous PR process versus all the code it hasn't. I could go on, but you get the idea. Now, look, it's natural for projects to become complex over time. I mean, we add new features to them, and it takes complexity to implement those features. But there's something about Rails that just makes it much worse and makes it happen much quicker. And I'm not suggesting that gems are the problem here, right? If we'd written all the code ourselves by hand, it's not like it would have been any better. But I think the way we use gems is kind of indicative of a problem here. We kind of solve problems by doing stuff, like we add a gem, or we run some scripts, or we write some code, or whatever, and all these things are adding complexity. And the problem is that if we leave this complexity unchecked, it kills projects. Now, there are some things we can do to avoid complexity, but they all involve doing less stuff and thinking more and caring more about the complexity in there. And this all takes time, and it doesn't make anybody happy, and it doesn't make anything easy. And it's not always the right thing to do either. I mean, quite often we need to just make progress. But this is all about balance. If we don't think about complexity ever, it will eventually kill our project. And nobody likes a dead project. So the next time you're thinking, great, there's a gem for this, or I can just bash out some code to fix it, maybe don't think that. Maybe try thinking about the problem instead. Maybe try searching for a simple solution. It's a tough thing to do because in the short term, nobody cares. But in the long term, your project depends on it. Thank you for listening.
This is a talk about Ruby papers we love. There's a website called rubybib.org, rubybib.org. I'm a researcher. I look at how Ruby is used in practice and about how Ruby is implemented. And to do that, I read a lot of Ruby papers. I don't think people know that there are a lot of Ruby academic papers out there. By papers, I mean documents written by scientists that are peer-reviewed, that go into journals and conferences. And if you go to rubybirb.org, you can see a list of these which I've curated. And there's a surprising number of these papers about all sorts of interesting ideas. And if you think some of the blog posts you see are interesting about what people can do with Ruby, you should take a look at some of the crazy ideas there are here and some of the history you can see about Ruby in these papers. So I'll talk you through a few of the papers I'm interested in. This is a paper on youre, which is the Ruby VM, which was implemented in Ruby 1.9. So if you remember the days from Ruby 1.8, which changed to Ruby 1.9, this is a paper written by Koichi, who worked on that, which describes how it works, what he was trying to do, and the whole idea behind youre. This is a paper which I wrote. It talks about how you can do meta-programming in Ruby without any overhead. So you've often been told probably that Ruby is slow. One of the reasons it's slow is because of meta-programming. People use things like method missing, as John was describing, and this paper describes how we can make that have no overhead and make it really fast. The previous talk was talking about, I mentioned that threading is often hard. Well, this is a paper which talks about how you can take a multi-threaded program and make it deterministic. So there's no conflict between threads. You know exactly what each thread is doing at every point, and your program can run completely deterministically, even though it's got multiple threads in it. You may have heard that Ruby has something called a global interpreter lock, which means you don't get parallelism when you run Ruby. This is a paper about removing that global interpreter lock by modifying the way that the processor works to allow multiple threads to run at the same time, even though they're holding this global interpreter lock, and then deconflicting that for you inside the processor. This is a paper by people at IBM. You may have heard people debating static typing in Ruby. This is a paper which talks about how we can infer static types for you. So you think you're writing a dynamic programming in Ruby, but actually it's inferring all these static types for you and making sure you have a statically typed program. We also talk about some papers which are history. So Ruby is quite related to Smalltalk, and some of the papers we list are actually related to Smalltalk, but they apply to Ruby as well. Now, reading papers sounds like something that only a scientist might want to do, and sometimes they can get a little bit complicated. And this is genuinely some maths from one of these papers, which is talking about how Ruby works. But the great thing about these papers is they have authors, and the authors always put their email addresses on them. And what a researcher loves more than anything else is to be able to get an email from someone asking to explain how their work works. So it'd be great to email them if you want to read one of these papers. And perhaps one good idea would be if you want to do a talk at something like your local Ruby user group or your company, and you don't know what to talk about, something great to maybe to take one of these papers, understand it, and then present that as a talk. And if you email the authors of the paper, they'll help you understand it to be able to do that. So that's rubybib.org, rubybib.org. Thanks very much.
There we go. Hello, I'm Florian. I also run conferences from time to time. I'm involved and board member in a nonprofit called Ruby Berlin. Many people haven't heard of that, but it's actually one of the largest Ruby nonprofits in Europe. We run 2 of the largest Rails Girls chapters. We maintain a code of conduct. One of the code of conduct maintainers, Youll, is sitting in the back. And we run a lot of events. And when we have a look at our code of conduct, we have a statement that says, we are committed to providing a friendly, safe, and welcoming environment to all, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, ability. And that's something I'd like to talk about today. The thing is, we figured out at some point that we're doing quite fine with one of our core conferences, the Eurocamp, on the whole diversity side, but one of the issues we had is we had an accessible conference, but no one dropped by. So what we did, we actually put that front and center for a year. So instead of just having a code of conduct on our page, we also had an accessibility statement on our page. This is the original first version that we did, and said, okay, we are an exclusive conference, and by the way, if you think you have any problems in visiting our conference, please come and talk to us. That nicely was picked up by RubyConf Australia and Evolve. They took the text and completely reworked it and everything and did a lot of advertisement for that. And so I thought, okay, if other conferences are interested in that, why don't I go around and ask conferences if they want to do the same? And this is where the circle closes. So I approached a British conference that was just popping up if they want to add something there. and now I'm on the BathRuby conference that has an accessibility statement and all the things like that. So this for a little introduction. The question here is, why should we run accessible events? Most events actually don't put any focus on that, especially in the IT sector. So why should we run accessible events? One of the reasons is that conferences are a main source of contacts, jobs, and learning. We have a job board out there. We have quite a lot of people that try to advertise to you to get a job with them, things like that. And for learnings, there's quite a lot of insight to be gained here. That means inaccessibility is discrimination, as bluntly put as that. And every time I talk to organizers about this, they're like, but it's so much work. And that actually isn't that true, in my experience. Accessibility just cannot be an afterthought to an event. Just to put the most obvious example, once you booked a non-accessible venue, it's hard to go back. You signed a contract of a room that costs you 20,000 euros, pound, or whatever, and you can't leave that contract. Which means before actually signing on a venue, go there and see if it meets all your requirements and everything like that. I heard that's less of a problem in the UK. In Germany, where I come from, that's actually a huge problem. People renting out venues will actively lie to you about their accessibility status, so you do have to go and visit. And it's a lot of simple things. For example, keep some tickets out of the sale. If you're doing a flash sale for an event, and there's people that have to think for 2 or 3 weeks whether they can actually attend it, they won't be able to participate in your flash sale. Keep 5 or 6 of them out and make sure that they can get them later. Accessibility is much more than wheelchair accessibility. That's the thing that's often seen as most front and center. It's also the thing that you can quickly fail at if you book the wrong venue. It also means quiet corners for people with sensory issues, autism, ADHD, all that stuff, flexible food for people with eating issues, translations. For example, in Germany, a lot of people speak English actually a lot worse than they say. If you go to the Southern American regions, people don't speak any English at all, so all conferences there are Spanish, English, live translated. Guides to show people around if it's a larger event and all that kind of stuff. Have a budget for that. It doesn't even have to be that high, but for example, if you have a stage like this, I had to take 2 stairs to go up here. That's easily fixed by a ramp. A ramp may cost you, I don't know, 80 pounds or something, but you should have a tiny budget for that around. Not everyone with an accessibility issue is disabled in a legal sense, so take a bit of care there. So be open for requests and be non-judgmental about all that. People with disabilities are usually experts in their disability. If you have any problem to solve, just ask them. They will probably have a good solution. So, but that's the problem we came up with. Are there any guides for this? And I found 2 guides for this. These are both German. That's one from a German nonprofit that cares about barrier-free and inclusive events. The problem is, that's a 100-page document. There's another one, wait a second, that's actually about how to run accessible parties and events, or to go on accessible demos if you want to. But it's still an 80-page document. So, and this is, I think, one of the missing parts. There's no quick and actionable guides, for example, for small meetups with no budget at all, which happens quite a lot in larger cities, and smaller conferences that are community funded and don't have that much money. Money is always an issue, and you have to plan with that, and there's ways and tricks on how to deal with that. And this is actually my small pitch. We are actually starting a project for that came up 3 weeks ago as the Ruby nonprofit Ruby Berlin, and together with another nonprofit that does projects for disabled people, Sozialhelden, and we're seeking funding for building a small website, especially for copy editing. If anyone's interested, please talk to me. Please follow me on Twitter or follow our Better Place account. I'm going to tweet the slides later. Thank you.
Hello. Right, yes, so mistakes I've made. So I've recently expanded my business book reading. I apologize in advance to the estate of Dr. Seuss. Other places you'll go. You'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who'll soar to great heights. You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest. Except when you don't. Because sometimes you won't. So this book is basically the kids' advice version of Fight Club. It's very easy as a developer to get caught up in the new and the thrill of creating things, that dopamine hit that we were talking about in the Sonic Pi talk, without paying attention to what you're actually doing or thinking about how you feel. It doesn't mean the societal validity of what your company's making. You want to build Facebook for dogs? Cool, rock on. That might be part of it, of course, but is what you're doing, the work you're doing, you're producing, making you happy? When you're capable of making things seemingly out of thin air, it's very easy to put a lot of pressure on yourself to be successful. And that's outside of the pressures that you'll be getting from the business to do things. So what I'm going to do is repackage some advice that you've all heard and probably ignored from my own experience and wrap it in a children's book and hope something sticks. You can get so confused that you'll start into race down long wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, to a most useless place. So I've done the VC thing. We even built something useful, like it actually had a chance. We charged money for something to actual human beings. I'm really bad at it. We raised a few $100,000 in Singapore, and as of now, 4 years on, the remnants of that company are currently being wound up. So there were lots of reasons it failed. Online travel is absolutely brutal. We were never able to make, selling Google ads work. We weren't able to turn those into booked holidays. Also, spending other people's money feels really weird. But there were any other number of fatal paper cuts. But there's something larger at play here, because we were somewhat undermined. So let's talk about the odds. Like, if you take VC for your company, this is what you're aiming at. Money! Money's nice, isn't it? Useful, good for things, houses, children, other things, cars, I don't know, whatever you fancy. However, even the best VCs only get a 1 in 10 return on their money. And in reality, it looks a lot more like this. That actually works on a macro level, but it sucks to be one of the skulls. Each of those skulls is years of people's lives. The VC doesn't mind, because they make all their money from the one money bag. It's important to understand the incentives of all the people involved in your business, your customers, your investors, your staff, your employees. If you're working for cheap or because of some dream that somebody sold you, I implore you to know why. Don't be exploited for dreams of future riches. All the places you'll go, there is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. We will make you the winningest winner of all for the magical things you can do with that ball. Fame. You'll be famous as famous can be, with the whole wide world watching you win on TV. Except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. Prizing money out of normal people is really hard, nearly impossible. I love to pretend I only tried this once, but I've tried this lots of times. Does not work. What you want to build, or try and be building if it's your thing, is something with demonstrable value to someone with money who's willing to give some to you in exchange for the valuable thing that you're providing for them. Be a maker of useful things, because even this doesn't work. Or, side projects are fun. Expand your skills, build something you want to see in the world, but don't try and make it into a business if it isn't one. And also, if you are going to take a job, don't be too employable for too long. I think a little bit of unemployability is healthy. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact. And remember that life's a great balancing act. So I went into business with this guy. Well, more accurately, this guy. Well, actually, this guy. So hands up if you've been in business with a billionaire. Anyone? Spoilers, does not always work out. So a buddy and I went into business with a friend of Eduardo Saverin, with him as the money, to form an idea lab. It sort of worked a bit. Sadly, the immediate success meant that as a group, we decided to surprise fire me in a Starbucks on a Tuesday lunchtime. I couldn't even have decent coffee as I was removed from my own company. So what it really boils down to is it's about making sure you're pulling in the right direction together. I mean, this is obvious, but it's easy to ignore your gut. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. So what now? Look after yourself, enjoy your work, do a good job, but set healthy limits for yourself. As an aside, the easiest way to do this is to have children. Then you're too tired to have a go at yourself properly, and you'll spend your time reading children's books. So be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Ali Van Allen O'Shea, you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. Before I go, I run a conference called Brighton Ruby. It's broadly similar to this, but in a different town beginning with B. You should totally buy tickets. I've got a discount in my pocket. Come find me. Thank you very much.